Hello, Jericomovie. I am a Christian theist. You recognize my screen name. I've been around for a while. If you want to know how to pronounce it, it's Namas Karis. Or you can just call me Jonathan, because that's my name. Ironically, the same as yours. Yeah, I didn't know what I was doing when I picked that screen name. It was a while ago, and bad idea. But I'm going to keep it. So anyway, let me take a shot at your original three arguments. I know that you're only going to be an atheist for one more day, and this is pretty late, and this is going to be kind of off the cuff. It's not what I'm accustomed to. I usually try to take time and, like, prepare the video over the course of at least a week or two. But I'm just going to do this off the cuff. Your first argument is that we can't use religious experiences to prove the existence of God because they can be reproduced in the laboratory. And I would argue that even if they couldn't be reproduced in the laboratory, religious experiences by themselves still could not prove the existence of God. The only thing that they could do is confirm a concept of a God that exists that we already have. Because if there's no concept there, if there's nothing to bear witness with the experience, then how would we know that the experience was really from God? It could be from anything. So in order to know that this experience is from God, we would already have to know what God is like. We would already have to have a concept of God existing in our minds. Otherwise, the experience means nothing. So I agree with you. We can't use religious experiences to prove the existence of God. I'm going to skip over your second argument for right now and go on to your third argument and just say, you're right. You're right about your third argument. It's not a good reason to believe something just because somebody else believes it. You can't do that. Okay. Now let's take a look at your second argument. Your second argument says that since God is prior to logic, in a sense, that we can't use logic to conclude his existence. Basically what you're saying is that God, since he is omnipotent, and since he is infinite, cannot be bound to any sets of laws or logic, anything like that. And you've created this dilemma. Either God is bound to an objective, absolute set of laws, like logic, and then we can logically conclude his existence, or else God is infinite, like we believe, and if he is, then he's not bound by logic, and we can't use logic to conclude his existence. Okay, that is your argument as I understand it. Now I'm going to propose that even if that is true, we could still use logic, in a sense, to prove the existence of God from logic, but we could still possibly prove his existence, because not all arguments are syllogistic or linear. Some arguments are transcendental. In other words, we know that this is true. Now, what would have to already be true? What would have to be true prior to this? Even if it's in a non-temporal sense, prior to this, in order for this to be true, in order to explain this in a meaningful way, in a logical way. And you can argue transcendentally in that sense for God. What if God is the very grounds and the very basis for logic in the first place? And in fact, it would kind of be a solution similar to Euthyphro's dilemma. Now the most famous response of a Christian theist like myself to something like Euthyphro's dilemma, and you already know what Euthyphro's dilemma is all about, is that God is not bound by any external standard of goodness, because goodness is defined as what is in agreement with the nature of God. So God himself, his own character, his own nature, is the standard of goodness. Therefore, good is not arbitrary, because God cannot just arbitrarily say that good is whatever it wants, since God God's existence, God's nature is not arbitrary. God's existence and nature is necessary and eternal. God does not just choose to be. No, God necessarily is. His nature is necessary. God cannot choose to not be. God does not choose to be. So therefore, it is not arbitrary that God calls good good. And I'm talking about Euthyphro's dilemma right now. And also, God is not bound to any standard outside of himself to say what is good, because goodness is simply what reflects his own nature. Goodness is simply what reflects his own will, and his will comes from his necessary nature. So, yeah, that's the solution to Euthyphro's dilemma. It's a false dichotomy. And we could propose the same kind of idea to get out of the dichotomy, the dilemma that you have presented. What if God is not bound to any external sets of laws of logic, not limited to those laws, because he himself is the only conceivable basis for logic itself? Since God is the one, he is the absolute one, and he is necessarily, he cannot not be, therefore he is the basis for the law of non-contradiction. He himself is the reason why a thing cannot be and not be at the same time and in the same relationship. Because God cannot be and not be. He is necessary. He would also be the basis for the law of identity. It's not that he is bound to these laws, but that he himself is the very foundation of these laws. And what I'm arguing is that it is possible to transcendentally argue for that, in a sense, by pointing out that any other explanation of logic is not logical at the end of the day. Any other explanation of logic does not adequately account for what we know logic is like and what we know logic is. It might be possible to argue for God in that way. So, that's my proposal. Gives you a lot to chew on. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I'm sorry that more theists have not been responding to your videos. God bless.